Welcome everybody to Bright Balls Online Community Stories, a series of conversations with leading entrepreneurs and individuals within B2B media that are driving and launching exciting and really interesting online communities. And with us today, we've got James Mays from Mind the Product, who has managed to transform a conference business into a membership offering. And this is a very interesting story because James, being a product individual product business, have used their own kind of product type of project approach to pivot their business. And essentially James and their team and his team and then with Mind the Product have become like almost like this kind of organization that all other entrepreneurs are looking for or using as benchmark. They'll appreciate hearing the story. So for me, this is a very exciting opportunity to share that with you and with the community. So James, welcome.
Thanks, Ricardo. Good to be here.
Good. James, do you want to give us a little bit of background and context around Mind the Product, who you guys are, what you guys do, and how long have you been in the market? What's your, again, size of your community, etc.?
Sure. So we started in London back in 2010. Essentially 3 product managers working at different startups. They realized the engineers had a meetup and the designers had a meetup. There was nothing for the product folks. So they started a little meetup. The first one was, I think, around 30 people in the back room of a London pub. Right. And fundamentally, product management at that time was a relatively nascent discipline, and just giving people the opportunity to come together and share those war stories with their peers was kind of the key point. Over the last few years, the first major step in that was when it became a conference in 2012. First London conference was 2012. Since then, it's kind of expanded in 2 ways. Firstly, the conferences, we took those by the end of 2019. We were running those conferences in London, San Francisco, Singapore, Hamburg, and Manchester. And the actual meetups, that grassroots community, is the bit that drove that strength right through. So those meetups are very much run by local organizers, essentially people in a particular city who want to see the world of product management thrive. And they're now active in, I think at the latest count, 208 cities around the world. Wow. With a total reach somewhere in the region of 300,000 product managers. There are a few of them working on the hardware side of things, but predominantly digital software product managers.
That's amazing. 300,000, the reach that you guys are able to have. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So so you've started as three product managers in the event. How did you start? Did you start with, was there any kind of approach to it? Did you start with content first? Did you start, how did it all kind of, and how did this meetup start?
So the first thing was literally my co-founder Martin threw up a page on meetup.com. Product people, come together, have a free beer, talk work. It was kind of a shared therapy session as much as anything else. And it literally, that just grew by word of mouth. Initially, and the London one got larger and larger. And it was purely driven by those meetups, and everything else literally followed that. So the blog side of things eventually came into being when they started saying, we actually want to share some of these war stories with the wider industry. Let's find a place to put those. So the meetup was called Product Tank originally. And then when the blog came into being, that was called Mind the Product.
Okay.
And then, so the conferences business came along probably 2 or so years after that. And it was kind of a big driver on it was the people in the community saying, whilst we're hearing from each other in London, it would be really great if we could actually hear some stories from the Valley. How is product built in San Francisco, for example? Those companies grow so much faster, do so much more. What can we learn from that? And Martin was looking at it along with Jana and Simon, the other original co-founders, and kind of the key realization was we can't, with a free meetup, you can't afford to pay for their tickets and accommodation to come to the UK. But if you put enough of them on the same day, you can sell tickets to a conference. Okay, let's make that work. first one was 450 or so people.
Right.
Absolute smash hit success on the feedback. The NPS score was somewhere around 70 mark. So like,
Amazing.
yeah, okay, let's do that again. And then that kind of gradually scaled. 2015, we went to San Francisco for the first time. That was kind of a nervy experience because we were looking at it and saying, we're the Brits, we're going to America, to the heart of technology, and we're going to tell them how to do product management properly. Hope they like it. But by that time, the blog had been running for 5 or so years. We'd built up a great following for the digital content that we were putting out there. So when we put those tickets on sale in the US, they sold out faster than we ever could have believed.
Wow.
We put out something like, I think we released 100 early bird tickets at $500 a ticket to test the US market and see how that went.
Right.
And our kind of feeling was like, if we can sell those 100 early birds in the first month, then that demonstrates there's a reasonable level of market confidence. We can go with that. Cool, right? We'll give ourselves a month. And I'm sitting here, I'm thinking the rest of the team are underestimating. We've got some good demand. I reckon these will go faster than that. And I was thinking, maybe they'll go in a week or so. That would be really cool. They sold out in 4 seconds.
Wow. 4 seconds.
4
Amazing.
seconds.
Wow. And how I mean, of course, you guys probably had that word of mouth. You had already a reputation. The meetups have picked up. You had an amazing blog, an amazing kind of place of content. Why do you think that like there was an element of like there was a real gap in the market, or do you think it was kind of something that you were doing specifically different? Did you have competitors at the time?
We didn't have much in the way of competitors. I mean, there were a few other things in the world of product, but nothing at the same sort of level that we were aiming at. And I think that was the key, was the curation, driven very much by Martin Ericsson at that point. The focus was on, quite simply, what are the best stories that we can tell? And with so many other technology conferences, then as much as now, the speaker lineups are driven quite often by which sponsors are spending money and how big their checkbook is. And it's like, when you get somebody like that on stage, they're going to pitch their product. First and foremost, it's like they are there to make a return on that investment. And that's the bit that we took a very different stance on that. We basically completely separated the curation and the commercial. So for a lot of those early years, Martin and I operated pretty much at arm's length. I looked after anything to do with commercial relationships and sponsoring partners. Martin looked after anything to do with what landed on stage or what actually got published on the site. And having that really clean separation led to essentially an awful lot of trust from our audience that we were absolutely there to do the right thing, to share the best stories. I think the other thing that went a long way is that you tend to find a lot of technology events, they'll either focus on enterprise grade customers, like the big existing digital corporations that have been around a long time, or they'll focus more exclusively on the startup world.
Right.
We actually took a different approach and said, we want to put both of those things in the same space. Because when you look at enterprise organizations, one of the biggest problems a lot of them have is they've actually forgotten how to innovate.
Right.
They've got bogged down in process and structure and they can't experiment anymore. Whereas if you look at fast growth startups, they're absolutely fine on the innovation. A lot of their challenges are around, how do we scale? How do we support not just 10,000 customers, but 100,000 customers or 1 million customers? Well, those are the problems that the enterprise is really good at solving. So if we put these two in a room together, they should be able to learn from one another.
Of course, totally. Amazing.
The other key part of Martin's curation is that he looks at product of saying, product is a mix of what the customer wants, what the technology team is actually capable of doing, where the business thinks it wants to go. It's kind of, product is at the heart of all of these things. And Martin has a great eye for picking different stories out of different aspects. So in a full day conference with 10 talks or whatever, there'll be a couple that are more at the design end of things. There'll be a couple that are more at the technology end of things. There will be a couple that are, much more oriented around the business side of things and how money is actually made and pricing strategies and things like that. And then on top of that, he layers on the regional aspects. So we want to hear a couple of stories from people building tech in Europe, a couple of people building in the Valley, and maybe somebody building over in Singapore. And you see the regional differences in how people build software. So getting those stories out and sharing them with new audiences, that's the bit where we really found value. That's I think more than anything else, that's what the audience appreciates.
Of course. And I think the technology industry or technology audiences that appreciate, they really value when organizations pay attention to their needs, and if they looked after them in terms of content and appreciate that, they're happy to share, they're happy to amplify the message and to spread the love, so to speak, in true kind of community terms. And James, just to be clear, so you always charged for your events. You've always asked for a ticket to be paid for all your activities.
Meetups have always been by and for the community. They remain for free. They've always been free. And essentially, we look for commercial partners to just host them and provide pizza, basically.
Okay.
And we've always viewed it as being a continuum. It's like the community end is the product tank meetups. They're free, have a pizza. The level of talks, sometimes they're an absolute smash hit. Sometimes they're people doing their first ever public talk. So there's a few nerves along the way and a few mishaps.
Right.
But that's the whole sort of organic end of things, right? And that's great speaker pipelining for us, is finding those new voices. We've always intended for the conferences to be at the other end of the scale. So yes, it's a paid for ticket, but you know, we don't host them in sort of stripped out warehouses or things like that. We use symphony orchestra venues with fantastic comfy seating, amazing auditoriums. You're not going to get half, you know, lukewarm coffee in a polystyrene cup. We'll have barista carts around the place, and you want a flat white, get a flat white, have a good coffee, you know?
Of course.
So they've always been aimed very much at that end of the market, and people appreciate that kind of quality.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I would love to get into the element of the pandemic, where, or actually, let's just get into the pandemic. I want to touch upon on the meetups, because I think many organizations either understand how they're run, but in some cases, there's a logistical element, there's a logistical issue, how to keep control of it, how to keep control of the brand and everything, which I want to touch upon on that. But I want to continue with the journey of like, so you've had kind of a good run of success, sold out events, putting more conferences out there, audience is growing. 2019 or 2020, early 2020, pandemic hit. Tell us about what happened there and how we all know what happened, but in the sense of within your business and how you guys kind of, as you've highlighted it, review the backlog of priorities and do the shift. Tell that story.
Absolutely. I mean, as you might imagine, the initial impact was nothing short of brutal. We'd spent 2019 investing in the platform, investing in the team, hiring new people, building out this spectacular team. Got to March 2020, we had 20 people on the payroll, and all of a sudden revenue just disappears. Everything stops. Not only that, you had Eventbrite change the way that they were actually paying out the money that they were holding, and they suddenly stopped doing advanced payouts. So they literally took out the industry at the knees with that. That was not a popular move across the industry. And then finally, you know, the bank account started going in reverse because we could no longer run events that we'd sold tickets or sponsorships for. And so far as we were concerned, we were going to find a way to survive this. We wanted our reputation to be intact. So we didn't just want to sit there and say, well, sorry, but, you know, beyond our control, we're keeping your money. We wanted anybody that wanted a refund, we wanted to be able to offer that. So we did that. UK government put in some support pretty quickly with the furlough scheme. So we furloughed pretty much the entire team immediately. It's like, we need to stem the bleeding first. Let's start there. And then myself and a number of others on the management team essentially worked without salaries for a while we figured out just exactly what we might be able to do here. And clearly running events wasn't going to be something that we could plan for anytime soon. We didn't know how long it was going to be. We knew it was going to be a while. And essentially, we'd had an item in the backlog that we'd considered a number of times, but not really found the time or the urgency to do anything with, which is this idea of saying, we've got fantastic content online, because at this point we had best part of 10 years worth of web and written, sort of video and written content on the site. And we'd always noodled around with the idea of doing some sort of membership program. What might that look like? But just never, it was never a priority, you know? And all of a sudden we've got absolutely no money coming in and we're not running events anywhere. Well, I guess we're going to take a look at that idea on the backlog then. That could be a thing. And it was Martin and our now managing director, Emily Tate, who took a huge load on leading that. And fundamentally, it was a case of, here's a hypothesis, but we don't know. Classic product management thinking. What's the smallest thing we can do to test this idea? Now, if I ask you, would you pay for a thing? Chances are you're going to be nice and say, yeah, that's a nice idea. You should build that. I would definitely buy it. That's very different to you actually turning up and giving me a check.
Right. Yeah, of course.
So, you know, we wanted to do something in earnest to test what's the smallest thing we can do to prove that Ricardo will enter his credit card details on this site and give us some money. So the first launch on that was maybe 8-10 weeks work, something of that sort of order. It was incredibly fast. We had a single dev here, a guy called Sean, who was an absolute hero through this. So he cranked out the first version of our paywall and subscription packages. which was partially using our WordPress platform, but then also integrating things like Paddle for powering the payment side of things. That first version launched, it got out there. Okay, it proved it worked. So at that point, we can start testing more and more. So like, what are the other things that people might find valuable? What are the parts we need to fine tune? And then looking more at the platform and saying, we launched this in a real hurry. There are undoubtedly some bad technology decisions in here. Let's start unpacking those and see which things we need to build better.
Okay.
One of the things that we're looking at is we're actually getting more and more customers coming to us from a corporate perspective and saying, we want all of our product management and all of our design people to have access to that resource. Can we buy 200 seats, please?
Wow.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic position for us to be in.
Of course, absolutely.
It then brings with it as an organization, we want to be able to manage which of our staff have access, and we want to be able to see whether or not they're making use of the online training courses and things like that. So we're starting to get a higher level of tooling required, and we're looking into what kind of development is needed there now. So it's going to, it's an iterative process. It's far from done. But we've got north of 2,000 paying customers on there now from a
wow, amazing. Wow, congratulations, James. That's a very, very good result. Just a quick question on the element on the MVP that you've created or that you've developed. So in parallel, of course, you would have quizzed or queried your audience to say, we're thinking about this. So did you get them involved from the word go as well? Did you work with small groups or with the whole audience? How did that work in conjunction with what you guys were doing that?
It was a bit of a mix. I mean, some of it was literally putting calls in with people and doing those conversations. We're looking at doing this. Would you be interested? And that sort of thing. Some of it, we did some pricing tests to see what people thought might be reasonable. So we had a little bit of guidance coming to us there. Personally, I'm starting to hear more and more feedback now from the larger companies to say this is an absolute bargain, which tells me that maybe we should think about increasing that pricing a little bit this year. But you know, our initial thing was the pricing matters less than actually proving that the thing works and that people want this. So that was the urgent thing. The other thing that we did that we thought was pretty crucial, actually we learned a lot from, was essentially a stack ranking exercise of listing all of the things that we thought we could include in a membership package and then putting that in public. Please rank these things. Tell us which of these things are most important to you so that we know what to actually work on and we know what to include. We discovered a fair few things in there that came as quite a surprise. I mean, you know, one of the things that one of my first assumptions was if we're charging people for an annual membership, one of the things they'll probably be really keen on is seeing discount access to the conferences when they come back.
Right.
Turns out, not really. Nobody's really bothered by that at all. Not important.
Wow. Very, very interesting, because that's kind of an initial thought. Okay, so we're an event business. We might as well, that's a key part of that, should be key part of the membership, right? So they've the audience basically validated that, not really.
Not that much of a problem for them. And you know, fundamentally looking at it in hindsight, you can say, well, actually, we do know that north of 80% of our customers just have their company pay for their tickets. So of course they're not that price sensitive. You know, these are typically people who work for multi-million-dollar companies. They're, you know, even the startups are well funded to the tune of a couple of million in VC or whatever. They just weren't that price sensitive. What they did do was they recognized that from the conferences we've run over the last 10 years, we have the best little black book in the industry. Right. So their interests were much more around, can you do a monthly AMA session with industry legends so that we could actually get FaceTime with some of the people who've defined how this industry runs, and the opportunity to have those conversations? Can you facilitate that? That's what they wanted to see for us. That and things like, how can you continue to facilitate networking of some kind in an era where we can't go meet up with people? Right. A lot of the time, less so now. You're seeing more and more uptake from product managers at a variety of firms, but there's certainly a period where if you were the product manager at your firm, you were probably the only one. It could be a very, very lonely industry. And even now, you find that the typical ratio of software engineers to product managers is typically like 10 engineers to one product person. Something like that is not unusual. So you're pretty outgunned. You know, one of the quotes from the early days that kind of stuck with me. I met somebody at one of our product meetups. I'm like, I don't think I've seen you here before. This is a London meetup. How did you find it? What do you think of Product Tank? And he said, you know, my CEO is insane. My engineers all hate me. This is therapy. It's been brilliant. So I think, you know, I think that's a fairly common view. I don't think he's the only person to hold that perspective. So that ability to bring people together and just let them share war stories with their peers was absolutely crucial prior to the pandemic. And then obviously everybody being stuck at home through the pandemic came even more to the fore.
Right. So you started validated with the audience what you might like. Those of you, those of your audience that said, "Yep, if you do this, I'll pay for it." Then you're like, "There you go." What do you think? So uptake was positive from the word go, and so basically they kind of put the money where the mouth
Yeah,
is.
I mean, it's like any subscription business. You'd like it to grow a little bit faster, but it's definitely going in the right direction, and we can see the sustainability improving. We can see the engagement sites, the engagement stats on the site. People are coming back and using more of it and delving deeper and deeper every time, and we're getting great feedback on what they want to see from us next. So our roadmap for the rest of this year is like we've got a good list of things to be working on.
Yeah, I think one of the elements also, James, that many people in your place, in other organizations, the question always is pricing.
Mm-hmm.
How did you approach that pricing? Because should we charge, I don't know, 100? Should we charge 1,000? What was the thought process around it? Because I know many people, I mean, whenever you go to any roundtable with event people that do it kind of, they're always, the question is, what is your membership proposition? What is, how did you go about pricing? Is there any gem that you can share on that front or that you could advise people in that probably be considering that?
The first thing that we wanted to achieve was we wanted to keep it at a level where it would be individually affordable. You weren't having to go to your company to ask for permission, to ask to expense it. We know there's a lot of product folks that operate as freelancers, so it's coming off their own budget. We knew that obviously it was a hard time for companies. People were being laid off, and this was a kind of support that people could really use to get them back on their feet. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of looking at it and thinking, ideally we want to hit a point where this is something that if you're not working, you could still justify paying for it out of your own pocket to upskill, to meet fellow peers, that kind of thing. So like, if we can get it to the point where it's a comparable price to a couple of coffees a week, something like that, that feels like the right sort of level to get it out there and get started. And we'll go from there.
Wow, that's an interesting one. So that's a good uptake, and then the audience started highlighting this is what we value in terms of content. You're adjusting content accordingly to provide that value.
Yeah, but it works out about the entry level membership works out about $5 a month, something like that.
Wow. Okay, that's kind of pretty affordable. So, and again, at this point in time, your audience is pretty big, anyways. How big was your audience at that time?
Oh, it was around about 270,000 in terms of the global community. It's grown a little since then.
Right. And James, a question around there, because there's many people highlight. Okay, many individuals talked about their community as the people that get exposed to the community versus the people that are actually in the house, sitting in the living room, more specifically. Mm-hmm. So do you know who those 200,000 people are?
We have an interesting mix of data on that topic, as you might imagine. So when we first started the meetups back in 2010, that was on meetup.com. So we now have something like 208 different meetup.com accounts with all of those local city members in there. We can't get their email addresses out of Meetup. We get no demographic information from that. Right. What we did start doing a couple of years ago is starting to build some of that functionality into the site. And likewise, we get more and more data whenever we do the digital conferences over the last year or so. We gather that data at Eventbrite, which company, what job title, which division do you work in, all of that sort of stuff, which location you're coming from. So we're starting to get richer and richer data. There's certainly a lot more that we'd like to gather in future.
Of course. And so then virtual events, virtual gatherings became like the proposition at that point in time, as well as the membership. Did you have any free element within your? How does that funnel, if we can call it that way, work for you? Or how does that? I would say, how is that membership proposition works at the time, or even right now? How does that look like?
So simply put, we've always viewed it, sort of mind the product, as being an opportunity for people to engage somewhere along the continuum, wherever they feel most comfortable. That idea of, you can attend your local Product Tank meetup for free, or you can attend a conference which will cost you $600-700. And it's like there's a range of experiences available to you depending on your budget and your commitment, that kind of thing. We wanted the membership side of things to reflect that too. So if you hit the site at the moment, the line that we take on content. Fundamentally, if it comes to us for free, we should also make that available to the community for free. So
Okay.
somebody in the community says, I've got a strong opinion on this. I'd like to write you an editorial contribution. Cool. You'll do it. You're taking your time to do that. We'll you can work with our editorial team. We'll put a bit of polish on it, but fundamentally, the vast majority of that's come to us for free. And likewise, the little the meetups that have been running through the pandemic have mostly been video streamed instead. So we've got all those videos. Again, that's free content for us. We should make that available for free to the community. So that's what we call our insider membership, which is always free, and you get access to that lot. Plus, we have a community built on the Slack platform with probably 50,000 or so product people in there. You get access to that as well.
Right.
That's the free element of it. What we then do is we basically say, if it's content that we've had to invest and pay for, you're going to pay to see it.
Okay.
Pure and simple. It's a very, very clean line. So that then includes anything where the editorial team have been doing research and deep dive articles. That includes the self-paced online training modules that we've been building over the last 12 months. If you missed out on the digital conference and you want to catch the keynotes, cool, that's in the membership portal as well. We know for the main conferences, we pay our speakers, even for the digital events, they get paid keynote fees.
Amazing.
The idea, for us, it's kind of twofold. It's firstly, we want them to feel like it's recognition of their efforts, right? We don't want you to turn up and you didn't really write something, you didn't really rehearse anything, you haven't put that much effort into it. That's not the deal. We're charging our members to come see this stuff, so we want you to put the effort into it. Therefore, we pay you fees. We want that level of professional diligence.
I think, yeah, go ahead.
It also takes people away from thinking, I'm here working for my company, I need to pitch the product, I need to get a return for them, I need to generate leads. No, we're not paying you because of who you work for. We're paying you because you've got great stories to share. Those are the stories that we want to hear.
I think that's kind of a very, very valuable aspect. You probably have met a lot of people in the events industry when you said, oh, we pay all our speakers by, everyone probably will raise their eyebrows. Like, what? Yeah. Wow, how do you do it? But I think that we had in our sessions, lead dev as part of the online community series, and they also have a policy of paying the speakers, paying whoever writes for the blog, because they recognize that keeps the organization impartial, and they value their time. And I think it's such an interesting story, because then I can see that there is a direct correlation with the audience, the community, rewarding you with their attention, presence, money, membership, when you also have, it's basically reciprocal. Everyone has kind of mutual respect, and sometimes having mutual respect for your speakers, for whoever contributes, rewarding them financially is a big element. So if anyone then kind of has the content that you've worked on, content that you've prepared, then you obviously will charge for. That's part of the membership of the tier membership. What else happens there in the membership? So I can become a membership has that membership pricing changed at all from, let's say, last year to the way it is right now?
No, there was a launch offer on there for a couple of months where it was reduced a little bit further. At the moment, it's $250 per year for the regular membership. That I think is due a review at some point soon, but it hasn't really reduced since then. But yeah, so you get access to that level of content that we just talked about. Likewise, we've been building out some self-serve training modules. So we basically offer two different kinds of training. If you as a company want us to come and train your product team, great. We run facilitated Zoom classrooms spread over a couple of days, and we'll work very closely to coach those people. But likewise, that's not right for everybody. That approach can be a bit expensive for some firms. So we also have self-service training modules, and they're typically broken up into small video segments. Watch this, understand this, and then do this exercise to drive the learning home. So that's included in the membership package as well. We launched an online discussion forum a month or so ago, so that's in there now. You do get the discounts to the conference tickets. And then on a pretty regular basis, we run member-only online events, so roughly once a month. And they're typically AMA type sessions. Here's an industry leader. This will be somebody on discovery, or this is someone road mapping. This one is someone on analytics, things like that. And it's typically one of our folks hosting that, asking the questions for the first 20 minutes to half hour, get the thing rolling, and then inviting questions from the community. Right.
That's kind of pretty interesting. So that will be like your tier 1 membership offering when people come in. You've highlighted before, attending a conference, that's fine. You will put it out. They'll pay extra for that. Is there any other tier? Is there a secondary tier or
There's
further
a
tiers?
second, yeah, there's another tier in the leadership and the membership program, which is the MTP leaders. And that one's invitation only. So typically what we're looking for is VPs or chief product officers. And this sort of came about by the way the industry's matured over the last couple of years. I was catching up with a chief product officer in London a couple of years back who used to be a regular at the Product Tank meetup. And I realized I hadn't seen him for a while. So I wanted to catch up. I was like, well, why haven't we seen you around? What's going on? And he said, well, when I used to come to Product Tank, I was a product manager who was responsible for managing backlog, of managing the roadmap, of doing those presentations. I was the only product manager in my firm. So coming to Product Tank gave me the opportunity to meet other product managers. He's now in the position where he is a product leader and he has 8 product managers on his team. He makes sure they come to Product Tank. He makes sure they get involved in it, but his challenges are now different. So his challenges are things like, how do I identify and support a poorly performing product manager? Right, you can't have that conversation in Product Tank with your team around you. You need a separate leadership experience where you can pose that question of other product leaders. So the leadership tier is designed to be a much smaller group of people, but they typically have a very different challenge. Typically it's VP, CPO type level, but essentially what we're really looking for in terms of qualifying criteria is one of two things. You're either managing and developing product managers more junior to yourself, so you have those challenges, or you're the one representing the product strategy at board level. If you fulfill one of those two categories, chances are then the leadership program is the one that you want. And it's designed to be a much smaller group, so we get much more exclusivity at those member events. There's a slightly different level of content that we publish, both in terms of the newsletter and on the site.
And then that, of course, is a by invitation only, but also a paid for. There's a different kind of fee structure to that.
Yeah.
James, there is when we go to SaaS type companies, they always have membership. You pay one year up front, or you pay monthly. You can exit where you want. Have you guys what are your thoughts on that? Have you got any data that proves one way or the other is best or not better? How does that work in your case?
I mean, for us, we offer both choices. People can pay either monthly or annually. Obviously, we prefer annual. It's always nice to have that money up front, especially when you're trying to survive a pandemic. We incentivize that, and you get a little bit of a discount if you take the annual option. We have found a number of people have started with the monthly and said, yep, let's flip that over to the annual. That's worthwhile. I think the big win for us was discovering over the last couple of months how to work with corporates. So instead of selling one pass at a time to one member at a time, we can work with one company and give them everything in a box, get 200 people on the platform from there.
Right.
The next thing that we need to work on then, the thing that's kind of a work in progress at the moment, is how we best support a community of practice. So if you have 10 product managers, for example, and they all have access to this content library together, is there a way that we can support the company in working through that library? So you work through it as a team, you all learn and develop together. Our learning can essentially underpin your internal community, and the whole lot becomes much more reinforced. So that's what we're putting some structure around at the moment, and figuring out how best we support companies on that.
Because probably that could be, I guess, somehow facilitated in understanding, and again, data will kind of tell what data is being consumed. And then with regard, that's very interesting. And then with regards to the training modules, self-paced training modules, was that a product of the pandemic where you kind of developed that internally?
Yeah.
How does that work? And tell us what has been your experience with that. How has the community received it?
So fundamentally, that was something when we started looking at the membership program, we figured that was something that we should be putting in the membership program. It would be a huge value add to people. That was something that we felt was absolutely suited to this pandemic environment that we found ourselves in. So firstly, we started looking around at companies that would actually support hosting that kind of content. We knew we didn't want to build the platform for that ourselves. We settled on Thinkific and basically integrated that deep into the site. So essentially, when you sign in as a member, not only do you get access to all our deep dive content, you get access to those Thinkific modules as well. And Thinkific is nicely branded so that it sits within the Mind the Product site. Feels like a nice joined up experience. And again, it was driven by a lot of customer development initially, having conversations with people. If we build modules like this, which things are you going to find most valuable? When we when we look at the stats on the site, which kinds of articles get most engagement, which are most popular? Let's use that to inform which topics we focus on first. And then we continue to engage with the audience, and you'll constantly see surveys from us going out on Twitter and things like that, where we're asking them, what kinds of things do you want next? And it's not like We don't want to run it as a popularity contest. It's not like if you get all your mates to vote for this one, we'll definitely build that one next. But it's just gauging that public reaction. It's like, what topics do come up most? What themes seem to be recurring? And then using that to inform where we go next.
That's an interesting thing you've pointed out, James, which is about looking at your data, looking at what types of articles is your audience is consuming, checking which ones are there more popular to help you inform what you're going to do next. You mentioned something that's very that I love. I love it when you say that the where is the value in that community? Where would have been the value of those 10 years worth of content and which is kind of around the user interaction. Tell us a little bit more about that particular aspect where when you've said, you know, the value is in the user interactions. Can you expand on that?
So I think, you know, the point I made early on about this community being a group of people who need to engage with others, I think part of that comes from it being such a nascent, immature discipline. And part of it comes from the very nature of the product role itself. I've heard it said a number of times, there's not necessarily one right way to do product management. And Martin will happily expand on a regular basis. The single most common answer in the world of product management is, it depends. And
sounds like the marketing world. It depends.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, you know, fundamentally, you'll be in some situations where you've got 10 engineers. You might be in a situation where you've got 200 engineers. You could be working in an industry where you're creating a totally new category of service, or you could be working in something like pharmaceuticals or banking, which is incredibly heavily regulated. So the approach that you're going to take is going to differ constantly. And it's that ability to bring people together and put them in a room where they can talk with other people was crucial to it. The other key part that, again, Martin has absolutely led from the start is to say, we're not going to tell people how to do product. What we are going to try and do is to expose as many great stories as we can and put people in the position where they can say, that experience is useful to the challenge I have right now. That experience is not. And they can go through the site and they can pull out the different bits they need according to the challenges that they're dealing with at any given moment. And we're actually starting to see some feedback from that now around the self-serve workshops that we've put up. With some people come back to us and like, they're experienced product managers. They've been in the industry a while, and they find themselves going into that and saying, I find myself having to deal with this kind of challenge at work. I did that 5 years ago, but I'm a bit rusty. So I'm just going to go and do that as a little refresher course, make sure that I'm using good habits before I go get stuck in again. So there's all kinds of different ways in which that reinforces. And I think a lot of it comes down to just the sheer level of trust that we've built over the years of the product is not dogmatic. It is focused on just sharing great examples and great stories.
And James, so when you have made that shift from a conference business to a membership-based organization, so now revenues generally will come from membership, or that's kind of where you're putting your effort. Where does the sponsorship fit in, if at all, or how does that kind of old model where sponsors want, okay, I want these groups of people, I want these audiences, I want to engage with this. How are you providing that solution?
Yeah. I mean, we ran a digital conference 2 weeks ago now for the US audience. So run on US time zones, targeting the people that we would usually service in person in San Francisco. Ran that on the Hop-In platform and had, I think, 8 or 9 sponsors joining us in the platform, running sponsor booths and doing giveaways and doing spotlights on, typically from the vendors particularly. The great approach for them is to be able to say, this is the product we're selling. These are the features that it makes available to the potential customers in the room, but they'll use it as an opportunity to say, we built it like this because this, or we chose to build this feature and not that one because. So when you're engaging with an audience of product managers who actually build software tools themselves, you get a very, very kind of different kind of conversation going on.
Of course.
And we've long been of the opinion that the way we try and effectively, the way we try and structure the budget for the major events that we run is that the ticket sales are probably 70 to 80% of the revenue split, something like that. And the aim is to make sure that everything on the day, all of those key parts like the hire of the venue and the speaker fees and all that good stuff, that's driven directly from ticket revenues. Having commercial partners there is essentially a nicety on top. So we'll use that revenue to upgrade the coffee or upgrade the Wi-Fi or contribute towards the after party and having a great free bar at the after party, things like that. But it's that it means that commercial revenue is something that is optional for us. It's great to have, and when we get that, we can do interesting things with it.
Of course,
the quality of the day, the focus of the day, everything is focused in around that attendee experience. That's the most important thing to us.
Right. And James, what about if a sponsor? Because I think it's always the key element of how do we start monetizing when we do this flip. What about if a sponsor wants to have exposure to the community itself, to the training modules, or if they want to do because a lot of other event organizers that have done the pivot became like a marketing services kind of organization. Do you guys have any element on that?
I mean, they're able to. We've got a service where they can quite happily contribute commercially to either sponsor the podcast or to produce an advertorial type piece for us. Something of that sort of nature. We don't let them anywhere near workshop and training content at all. That is something that sponsor dollars just don't get to touch. We would destroy our reputation so fast if that happened. So that doesn't happen. And then in terms of the actual sort of conference, getting exposure on the stage and things like that, there's a couple of different options. If they've got product people within their own organization with awesome stories to tell, great, submit them as a potential speaker and they'll go through the same sort of selection criteria as everybody else. On the other hand, if you actually want to get on a stage and pitch your product and talk about that, cool. We offer spotlight opportunities where we can say, here's a spotlight on such and such a product. They're going to do a presentation for the next 20 minutes. But then it's very, very clear to the audience that the sponsor has paid for that session and this will be demo heavy. It's that kind of approach. And again, that's the one where the audience are like, we know if it's on the main stage, that's where we're getting to hear the real meaty stories. If it's a demo spotlight, if they're interested in the product, they'll go and see the demo and they'll have a great time. And the vendor will get the leads from it. But it's very, very clear that this is a sponsored opportunity type thing.
That's a good thing. Now, moving on, I wanted to understand if how does now physical events fit into your business business schedule or into your forward planning? Are they obviously, are you guys having physical events happening soon, or what's your position on that?
It's funny you should ask, Ricardo. Tickets for the London conference went on sale today. Get in. We've actually seen strong sales coming through this morning, so the appetite is definitely there for those physical events.
Right.
I mean, because the global spread, we've got some cities that did open up pretty early on. So the meetups down in New Zealand, for example, have been back to normal for some time now. And if you take a look at the site today, the top story on there published earlier today was a review from that Product Tank Sydney, Product Tank New Zealand organizer, Ant Marta, on how things are coming back together there and what it's like being the first to run real world events again. So we're trying to share some of those stories with the wider community as well. In terms of forward planning for the bigger events, our London conference is usually in October for around 1,700 people. Now, we know for a fact that we're not going to be able to do a conference comfortably this year for 1,700 people in London. However, London is opening up again. Technically, we can run those conferences. So we've got the space reserved. We put the tickets on sale this morning. We'll ideally do a hybrid event where we'll have maybe 400 or 500 people in person, and then we'll also have the online option for the people that don't want to travel or can't travel for whatever reason. So we can hopefully run that. To be honest, though, the numbers are unpredictable, the actual COVID numbers in the UK at the moment. So come October, will we be able to run that event or not? It's unclear. I don't think anybody is going to sit here and say that will definitely happen. Nobody has that level of confidence right now. What we have got is a very, very strong plan in place in terms of if we have to cancel the physical element, the hybrid element still goes ahead. We'll make sure that everybody's
You'll have all that fallback plan. Amazing.
Absolutely.
And this is kind of the important aspect, that you now know how you're going to manage that situation if it comes to play, which there's a high probability of that it might happen. You still have your membership proposition, and I think that's kind of amazing. So
this is where we have to put the shout out to other people on the team, and I'll call out particularly our marketing manager Amy, who's just been heroic over the last couple of years. Like every time this changes, she's the one who's got to figure out what we're doing with Eventbrite, what the messaging needs to be, what the emails need to see, what people are going to ignore completely because they're going to go and click that button over there instead, and then Lauren's going to end up with all the customer inquiries coming back. They've been heroic behind the scenes, but it's I think all power to Amy on that one, who just works so hard on the messaging to make sure that when we do something like this, she gives people confidence that it's going to go ahead, but also gives them confidence of, if it's not, we're covered. This is how we're going to manage it.
Amazing. And then you've been kind of a very, very in touch with your audience to give them that comfort. I was going to ask about that. Has the way in which you market your products, your business changed? Of course it has, but has it changed dramatically? What would you say is different? Or what would you say to another entrepreneur that's kind of thinking about this? How does it change? How does it differ?
I don't think it's changed that much, to be honest. I mean, fundamentally, we've had to recognize that what we do is publish online now, instead of actually doing these things in real life. But fundamentally, the same things are still true. You know, we're focused on finding the best stories. We're focused on making sure that the customer experience is spectacular. We're focused on enabling you to connect with your peers and to build those relationships and to learn from one another. None of that's changed.
So it's good to...
There's a lot of similarity that remains there.
And I'm conscious of the time now, James, with you being extremely generous. I wanted to understand what have been your learnings throughout all this process. If you were going to do it all over again from the product management point of view or anything, is there anything that you would have done differently, or what was the big thing that you like? Again, thinking about all the individuals out there that are potentially going through or thinking of going through that process.
I think the first thing to call out is that by having product managers at the heart of our company, we were incredibly lucky in that respect. These are people who are designed to thrive in uncertainty and to do discovery and to launch new products. That was at the heart of what we needed. We had great people. Clearly, for anybody who's looking to do this for the first time, we have some amazing workshops on discovery that people can pick up on the site.
I was going to say that. Of course, you guys are a product. You guys have
absolutely
those the blueprints that people can use that.
Yeah, I think the other thing that really paid off, for an awful long time, we have invested incredibly heavily in looking after our team. Their emotional well-being, giving them the tools that they need, figuring out how we can collaborate effectively as a distributed team. And when it came to the pandemic landing and needing to furlough people and mess around with working hours and change things left, right, and center, the team here have been absolutely spectacular in terms of how they've reacted to that. They've stepped back when needed, they've stepped up when needed, they've been phenomenal. But I think that's because of the way that we've looked after people for 5-10 years prior to having to make that call. I think it's one of those where if you try and invest in your team when you need it, it's too late. You invest in your team early, invest in them as much as you possibly can, make them real. You know, there's so many companies who say, we're a people first business. Everything's about our team. And it's bollocks. It really is. Whereas we've worked incredibly hard on that from day one. We've always looked after people in the best way that we possibly can. And when it came time for us to sort of essentially call that debt in and ask them to really front up and be there for us, they've been spectacular. So the lesson I would take away from that is that there were points in preceding years where I could have looked at the business and said, we could be more profitable if we stopped doing this for the team or stopped looking after them in that way.
Right.
They would not have been smart cuts. Going through what we've gone through now, I would absolutely invest in the team again, like that, again and again and again. It was absolutely the right call. And you know, when the chips were down, they were absolutely there for us.
Amazing, amazing. And is there anything all this process, you build your own tech? So yes, initially your minimum viable product was WordPress plus plugins and stuff like that. Would you still do it that way? Would you still, and I take it you now are developing your own or adjusting your own technology to fit.
Sean is beavering away and looking at the bits on there that need to be ripped out, refactored and recoded and improved and all that sort of good stuff. I'd absolutely take that approach again. I don't think we have any problem with that. I think the thing to be aware of, the thing that people sort of overlook too easily, is to say when you're doing something in a hurry, you're going to make some bad decisions. There is going to be some stuff that you need to rebuild in time. And I think sometimes people feel bad about that. It's like, it's okay to feel okay with that. It's okay to have tech debt. The key is to recognize it and saying, we're making this trade-off intentionally. It's not like we're just rushing because we don't have time. It's like, no, we're launching quickly so that we can learn X. We also recognize that this has been badly built and we will have to go back to it in future. So let's bake that into our assumptions. Let's recognize that's there and recognize that in 3 months' time, we're probably going to need to set aside 2 weeks for rewriting that plugin or changing that bit of code. That's nothing to be ashamed of. I don't think there's a problem with that approach. It's more a case of just giving it that headline recognition and making those trade-offs intentionally, recognizing that they exist.
Yeah, because I think many organizations think a lot about the tech, and it becomes almost like a roadblock. And you start doing research, you start doing that, and then you can't, or companies cannot make decisions. But I think critically, tech debt is something that one or organizations need to, as you say, recognize or invest, or knowing that that's going to be, but you don't have to kind of be dealing with it. That's
people look at tech debt as being a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. I mean, you go into debt in order to buy a house, right? You take out a mortgage. Going into debt in order to achieve a bigger thing is okay, so long as you recognize that debt exists and you have a way to pay it back.
That's pretty. You've hit it on the head. And I think now that terminology is now becoming more common among
For sure.
entrepreneurs, CEOs of understanding, because technology ultimately is now what's driving every single organization, and I think it's going to be an important aspect.
I know organizations that have been on a digital transformation journey for the last 20 years. They've made more progress in the last 6 months than they did in the last 2 decades.
Absolutely, and especially within the events industry, and everyone just had to accelerate. And as you rightly said, it's kind of taking and reprioritizing everything. I think marketing teams have been amazingly resilient, being able to adapt to the process. Is your team different, and is your skill set different than it was before the pandemic?
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. It's just running a digital event is very, very different to running a physical event. We've certainly seen the team changing in terms of their skills and how they put together an event, how they market the event, the consideration that goes into the language, how we're explaining things, what the refunds policy might be. And also putting sort of far more work into the preparation of that digital content that goes with, and our ability to now edit and prepare a lot more videos in-house and produce that kind of material. So yeah, certainly the skill set's changed. And we did have one person on the team who was very heavily focused on venue logistics. That person unfortunately went by the wayside as we changed over the last year or so. But his career was looking to take a different turn anyway, so it was the right time for him to go off and travel and do his thing. Right. Will we hire again for those skills? Probably not. That's probably not something that we'll bring back into the team full time. I think there's a probability that we'll, certainly in the short to medium term, work with freelancers to acquire those skills as and when needed in the locations needed.
And then I guess to almost to wrap up, James, clearly it worked, right? So and if it worked really, really well, how is your community now in terms of, initially you gave us the concept about your community and everything, that did it grow, or do you think, so what was the biggest impact that the changes that you've undergone had on your community and on the business, and if you were going to highlight one of them?
I think probably the single biggest impact is that we continued coffee. I think the single biggest impact is that everybody has been working from home for the last 18 months. We were always one of those spaces where people could come together, meet their peers and have those conversations. And we've managed to continue that. We've managed to make sure that that is still available to all of the product managers throughout our community, wherever they are in the world, and giving them that constant, that backdrop of support, enabling that continuity to be there for them has been incredibly powerful. What we've been going through in the meantime of working on the site and redeveloping some of that is that we're now seeing people who are exploring the site more than they ever did before. They're using more of that content, and they're starting to reach out to one another more and have those conversations. So if anything, the community has been strengthened by this. What is going to be exciting is seeing everybody come back together face to face when that opportunity exists. And I think probably this year, we'll hopefully be able to do the London conference in October. We'll bring a small number of people together to that, maybe 400 or 500 people, as I say. The one I'm really looking forward to is when we do London next year, and hopefully everything's fully opened up again, and we can get hopefully 1,700 people back together at the Barbican. Because what we found in previous years is that you get certain cities from across Europe, the individual product tank they'll talk to one another, they'll coordinate their flights and hotels. So then you get to the Barbican and you're looking around the auditorium one of the days, like, there's the German contingent. We've got the Italians up there. Yeah, we've got the guys over from France up there. And you can see these people coming together. And it's like this assembly of people. It's phenomenal to see.
It's a true sense of community, right? That's what it's all about, right?
Yeah. You know, I think last year, 2019, I think we had 200 people over from Germany, and we have meetups in 5 different German cities. It's like, that's the Berlin crew, that's the Hamburg crew, and they've traveled together, they're staying in the hotel. And a lot of time, a lot of the time we run the conference on a Friday in London. So people have this all-day conference and then a cracking after party, and then they'll stay for the weekend and be a tourist in London and use that opportunity. So I think seeing all of that come back together next year is going to be a pretty emotional experience. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be very good. Well, James, you've been extremely generous with the information that you've shared. You've clearly have done an amazing job. Congratulations on the work. And if there's anyone that has questions or anything like that, where can they reach you, or how can they connect with you?
LinkedIn and Twitter, I'm pretty easy to find.
That's fine.
I spent 15, my previous career, I spent 15 years as a recruiter. So my LinkedIn is a LinkedIn anyway.
Brilliant,
yeah,
James.
Feel free to reach out and connect. Very happy.
Thank you very much, James, for your time. And till next time.
My pleasure.
Thank you.